The crystal toast was interrupted by the heavy clatter of cheap steel hitting fine china. My brother, Brandon, the district attorney of Fairview Heights, didn't just interrupt our father's retirement party, he performed. He slammed a pair of handcuffs onto the white tablecloth, right next to the vintage wine. "Megan Vance, you are under arrest for high treason and corporate espionage," he boomed, his voice echoing across the silent garden. 100 guests gasped. My mother covered her mouth in practiced horror. Brandon smiled, holding up a classified folder like a trophy. He thought he had just caught a traitor. He had no idea he was standing in the kill zone. "I'm Megan Vance. Before I tell you what happens when a small-town district attorney tries to arrest a director of covert ops, drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these stories travel." I did not scream. I did not beg. I simply looked at the cuffs, then up at my brother's face. He was vibrating with adrenaline, his eyes wide and manic, feeding off the shock of the room. He wanted tears. He wanted a confession. He wanted his big sister to crumble so he could finally be the strong one. I gave him nothing. Panic is a luxury for people who do not have a plan. I had 3. My right hand rested casually on the edge of the table, right next to the dessert fork. My thumb slid under the face of my watch. A piece of tech that looked like a standard luxury timepiece but cost more than Brandon's entire house. I found the recessed button at the 4 o'clock position. It was a silent distress beacon, coded for a level 1 extraction. It was designed to bring down the wrath of God on any location in the world within moments. I pressed it. A single haptic pulse against my wrist confirmed the signal was sent. I checked the time. 7:42 in the evening. Based on the location of the nearest federal safe house and the readiness status of my personal security detail, I did not have to guess when help would arrive. I did the math instantly. Distance, traffic, tactical speed. 8 minutes. I had to endure this charade for exactly 8 minutes. "You have the right to remain silent," Brandon recited, his voice trembling with delight. He was puffing his chest out, playing the hero for an audience of country club retirees and shocked socialites. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." I almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. He was reading me my rights while violating federal laws he didn't even know existed. He wasn't arresting a logistics manager. He was unlawfully detaining a director of covert operations. He had just declared war on the United States intelligence community, and he thought he was winning a family feud. To my left, my mother, Cynthia, finally found her voice. It wasn't a voice of defense. It wasn't a mother protecting her child. It was a socialite protecting her standing. "Oh, Megan," she wailed, pressing a silk napkin to her dry eyes. "How could you? On your father's night? How could you bring this shame into our house?" She wasn't looking at me. She was scanning the room, tallying the damage to her reputation. She was wondering if the neighbors would still come to her bridge club next week. She looked at me not as a daughter but as a stain on her white carpet. I felt a flicker of old pain, the ache of the little girl who just wanted her mother to choose her. But I smothered it. That girl was gone. I replaced her with the director. I looked at my mother, then at Brandon, and then at the guests whispering behind their hands. They looked like vultures circling a carcass. They thought this was the end of my life. They didn't realize they were standing at ground zero. 7 minutes left. I sat back in my chair, crossed my legs, and took a sip of water. The ice clinked against the glass, a sharp, clear sound in the murmuring garden. "Are you done, Brandon?" I asked. My voice was calm, almost bored. It cut through his theatrical performance like a scalpel. He blinked, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. He hadn't expected boredom. He had expected hysteria. "I'm just getting started," he spat, grabbing the manila folder again. "Wait until they see what's in here." I watched him, counting down the seconds in my head. 6 minutes and 45 seconds. "Proceed," I said. The clock was ticking and midnight was coming early for Fairview Heights. Brandon opened the folder like he was reading a royal decree. He pulled out a stack of grainy photographs. Me entering my apartment building in D.C., me meeting a contact on a park bench, me carrying boxes into a storage unit. "Look at this," he announced, holding up a picture of me in a hoodie looking over my shoulder. "Does this look like a logistics manager? Or does it look like a criminal moving stolen goods?" My mother gasped, right on cue. "Oh, Megan. You always had to be so secretive. Why couldn't you just live a normal life?" I stared at the photo. That was taken 3 years ago. I wasn't moving stolen goods. I was moving a defector's family into a safe house. The box I was carrying contained new identities, not contraband. I retreated into the quiet room in the back of my mind. It was a habit I had developed over the last decade. While they judged the surface, I analyzed the architecture of their resentment. They hated me because I was absent. They hated me because for 10 years I had been a ghost. I missed Christmas. I miss Thanksgiving. When Grandma Martha had her hip surgery, I sent flowers and a check, but I didn't visit. When my father turned 60, I sent a generic card 2 days late. They called it selfishness. They called it coldness. They told the neighbors I was struggling to find my way, to cover up their embarrassment. They didn't understand the economics of my silence. In my line of work, intimacy is a vulnerability. Connection is a vector for attack. If I came home for Christmas, I didn't just bring presents. I brought a target. My shadow world has enemies who don't care about collateral damage. A district attorney brother and a socialite mother are not assets. They are leverage. I made a transactional decision 10 years ago. I traded their love for their safety. I let them believe I was a failure. I let them believe I was distant and ungrateful. I let them talk about me in hushed, pitying tones at the country club. Because as long as they thought I was nobody, nobody would look at them. My absence was the premium I paid on their life insurance policy. It was the highest form of love I could offer, and it was a love that required them to hate me. And here, Brandon continued, pulling out a bank statement. Look at these deposits. Irregular amounts. Cash withdrawals. She's laundering money, Mom. She's a criminal. I looked at my mother. She was shaking her head, tears ruining her mascara. She wasn't crying because she thought I was a criminal. She was crying because a criminal daughter didn't fit the aesthetic of her retirement party. I tried to help her, Brandon said, playing to the crowd. I tried to get her to open up. But she just shut me out. He didn't try to help me. He tried to pry. He tried to open a door that I had welded shut to keep the monsters out. Silence is a heavy coat to wear, especially when it's 90 degrees in the shade and your own blood is screaming at you. But I wore it. I wore it when I was alone in foreign hotels. I wore it when I received voicemails from my dad asking why I couldn't make it home. I wore it because the alternative was a flag-draped coffin. Brandon tossed the papers onto the table. They scattered over the untouched appetizers. You have nothing to say? He taunted. No defense. No explanation for where you've been for 10 years. I looked at him. I looked at the soft, uncalloused hands of a man who had never held anything heavier than a gavel. I was working, I said softly. Working. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Doing what? Stealing from the taxpayers. He thought he was exposing a lie. He didn't realize he was digging up a landmine. Brandon was on a roll now, fueled by the murmurs of the crowd and the validation of our mother's tears. He paced around the table, holding court in his own mind. He picked up another document, a printout of an email chain. And it's not just money, he declared, his voice thick with righteous indignation. She's been selling our secrets. Look at this. He waved the paper in the air. Encrypted messages. Foreign contacts. She's been dealing with people who want to hurt this country. My mother let out a small, strangled sob. Megan, tell me it isn't true. Tell me you haven't betrayed us. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was a mask of tragic disappointment, perfectly composed for public consumption. She wasn't asking for the truth. She was asking for me to play my role in her tragedy. You always thought you were better than us, Brandon sneered, tossing the paper onto the table. You left for the city, got your little degree and looked down on everyone here. But you weren't better. You were just a crook. He paused for effect, leaning in close. You know what the sad part is? I looked up to you. I thought my big sister was going places. Turns out the only place you're going is federal prison. He was enjoying this too much. He was feeding on my silence, mistaking it for submission. He didn't understand the Dunning-Kruger effect playing out in real time. He was so incompetent he couldn't even recognize his own incompetence. He thought he was a brilliant prosecutor dismantling a criminal enterprise. He didn't realize he was a child playing with a live grenade. And don't think you can talk your way out of this, he continued, gesturing to the guests. These people are witnesses. They've seen the evidence. They know what you are. He was trying to isolate me, to turn the community against me so I would have nowhere to run. It was a classic bully tactic, amplified by his position of authority. He wanted to destroy my reputation so completely that even if I escaped the legal charges, I would have no life left to return to. You're a disgrace, he spat. To this family. To this town. To our father. That was the line. I felt a cold spike of anger in my chest. My father had been a good man, a quiet man who worked hard and loved his family. He would have been horrified by this spectacle. He would have been ashamed of his son. Leave Dad out of this, I said, my voice low but cutting through the ambient noise of the garden. I will not. Brandon shouted, his face reddening. This is his party. This was supposed to be his night. And you ruined it with your crimes. He was projecting. He was the one ruining the night. He was the one making a scene. But in his twisted logic, my mere existence was the offense. My refusal to be the failure he needed me to be was the crime. You're jealous, I said simply. The words hung in the air. Brandon froze. My mother gasped. Jealous? He laughed, a brittle, incredulous sound. Of what? A criminal? A failure who lives in a shoebox apartment and has no friends? Please. You're jealous that I left, I continued, my voice steady. You're jealous that I built a life outside of this town, outside of your control. You're the big fish in the small pond, Brandon. And you hate that I found an ocean. His face contorted with rage. I had hit the nerve. I had named the thing he couldn't admit to himself. You think you're so special, he hissed. But you're nothing. You're just a thief. He grabbed the handcuffs on the table, dangling them in front of me. And now everyone knows it. He looked at me with pure malice, waiting for me to break. Waiting for the tears, the begging, the submission. I looked at my watch. 4 minutes. Are you finished? I asked. He stared at me, confused by my lack of reaction. He didn't know what to do with a victim who wouldn't play the victim. I'm done when you're in a cell, he growled. Then we have a problem, I said. Because that's not going to happen. He laughed again, but it was thinner this time, laced with uncertainty. Oh yeah. And who's going to stop me? I looked past him toward the gate of the country club. Wait and see, I said. Brandon, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the humid air like a gunshot. He stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open, the handcuffs dangling from his finger. I have one question, I said quietly. Think before you answer. This is your only chance to save yourself. Brandon sneered. I'm the one asking questions. You're the suspect. I leaned in. Did you open the black polymer pouch in my satchel, the one with the red seal? Of course, he said. Probable cause. Look it up. And you read the documents? Showed them to Mother? Waved them in front of 100 civilians with no clearance. I'm building a case, he insisted. No, I said. You're committing a felony. He faltered as I stood. Those documents aren't classified. They're decoys. Canary traps. His face drained. If you checked under UV, you'd have seen the watermark. Training material. Non-classified. I planted them to test whether you were merely jealous or dangerous. I stepped closer. You didn't catch a spy. You failed a loyalty test. He tried to recover, but I kept going. The Department of Justice will care. Because while the documents are fake, the statute you violated is real. 18 U.S.C. 793. 10 years in federal prison. More if you add public corruption. He went pale. Papers slipped from his hands. At 0 seconds the ground vibrated. A helicopter roared overhead. 2 armored SUVs smashed through the hedges, stopping in formation. Federal extraction specialists poured out, weapons low ready. General Marcus Delaney stepped from the lead vehicle, saluted me and said, Director Vance. Asset is secure. We're ready for extraction. Brandon froze. Director. She is the Director of Covert Operations for the Eastern Hemisphere, Delaney said coldly. And you are interfering with a national security asset. The agents took him down hard. My mother screamed, pleading. I felt nothing. Family, I realized, isn't blood. It's loyalty. And these people had never offered me any. I walked to the SUV. No, General, I said. I don't need a moment. Months later at headquarters I saw the update. Brandon had taken a plea deal, 12 years. My parents had sold the house to pay for his defense. They tried to contact me, I never replied. I deleted the notifications, turned back to my team and resumed work.